That's mine. That's my name. You trying to do name? What's wrong? God.
Good man, cellular device. Put it up.
Here. Well, so 100
All right. Last call for this packet right here. It says causes of the American Revolution. Is that what y'all been studying about? I feel like I know a thing or two about the American Revolution. This would be a good substitute day for me. It'll be fun. Anybody else? Last call.
Let me see.
I see Jason is helping us out by putting someone's no name on the John Hancock wall. That might be yours. Good night. Good night.
That's late. That's 10% go. Every day. 10% go. You got to I ain't doing it. I want to
All right, young people. Good morning.
Good night.
Oh, hey. Where I come from, the time I come from, when I was a kid, someone said good morning to you, you say good morning back to them. Good morning. Good morning. That's a little better. My name is, you just call me Mr. George. You call me Mr. George, and I'm your substitute teacher for the day. I been in touch with Mr. Swanson. His Army drill went a little bit longer than just the weekend. So I saw this job in the substitute system and decided to pick it up. That's what I like to do in my older years. I like to get back into the schools and substitute for the younger kids. And, you know, sometimes they put me on the math hallway, and I just don't know much about math. But social studies, I have a feeling my life experiences are going to be able to share alongside what you're learning today. I see the causes of the American Revolution, and I just feel like I'm going to have a little bit to contribute along the way. So you just call me Mr. George. That'll be fine. And I'm excited to spend a day with you. Now your instructor will have quite the packet of notes here. So let me make sure I'm doing everything right. I just want to do it just the way he would do it in class. So first of all, you've turned in causes of the American Revolution. Check. Anyone else? Anyone else? Causes of the American Revolution. All right, this has been turned in, and it seems that he has a very organized system for that. No names and zeros. I'm just going to read off of his notes here. If you didn't put your name on a paper, he doesn't know who to give the points to. So if your name wasn't on the paper, you might have a 0 in the grade book. And I will offer a big fat for example. Here's a no name. And we also have the no name wall. So if you're looking for something that did not have a name on it, you need to you can look at the no name wall. And the caveat to that would be handwriting. Some of y'all on the struggle bus for handwriting, and old eyes like these just can't read some of that chicken scratch. So it's real simple, guys. If Mr. Swanson can't read it, Mr. Swanson can't grade it. So that's the statement to be made there. And then if there is a 0 in the grade book, it's because, this is on the notes here, as he went through the grading, if he didn't have yours, he plugged into 0. It doesn't matter, if you were absent, you just return it, okay? If you were absent, get that paper put in, and it's not gonna be minus 10%. That's in accordance with school policies. But if you swear you turned it in, I know that I already did that, you might need to either check your papers or check the no-name wall, because I have my stack. It's paper clip. I go through the grades. And if I don't have yours at the end of that stack, I don't have it. I don't have it. Mistakes get made, but I've been wrong before, but usually it's along the lines of stuffed into a binder somewhere, or no name, or illegible handwriting. So that, if you see a 0, at least that means you've been paying attention to your grades. All right, we can address that. Mistakes happen. Deadlines get missed. The late box. It works. But if you're a student who's not even checking your grades, then I have concerns that you don't even know that you're in this slide of 0s. So I think I talked to some of y'all individually. You're absent for 3 consecutive days. Understand. You got that many days to get it turned back in. New seating, right? You've all found a new home a little bit. That is a product of we've had 2 weeks together now, and I've learned some personalities, and larger class, just going to shake things up periodically, right? So whether you love your seat or hate your seat, you can know that you're going to change eventually. It's not going to be here for the next all the way till Christmas. So won't be the last time we change seats across the semester. Whether you love your seat or you hate your seat, hang in there. We will change eventually. You have new partners, new shoulder partners, new chat buddies. Go ahead and get to know your classmates. My goal would be that everybody knows each other by the end of the semester. Does everybody have some colored pencils? We're going to do something along the way today where you need colored pencils. So whether that's your own, gel pens, markers, whatever, I'm offering you colored pencils. You're going to need, 4, 5, 6 colors. Going to do a little art along the way today. So go ahead and do that now.
It's the color pencils.
Yeah. This young man is in force. I apologize. I don't know everyone's name. Young man, what's your name?
And they call me
They call me
John.
I'm gonna call you okay. John, Mr. George. Mr. George, nice to meet you. This man seems to be an enforcer in the classroom. I kind of like that. And then let me tell you the plan for the week, because I think it's important to know where we're going this week. I'm a substitute. I just walked in this room, but even I can see that your next benchmark exam is August 19th. What day is that? Friday. Okay, this Friday. So here's the plan for the week. We got to get through the events of the American Revolution Monday, Tuesday. We're going to talk about our new government, the Constitution, on Wednesday. Thursday is going to be deliberate review, all day Thursday review. Friday is the exam. Okay, so you have a study guide. We're going to review along the way, but of course we're still spitting out information. You got to know Friday is your exam. Period in statement. Okay? Friday is the exam. So, and then finally, I appreciate that last statement there. Have respect for the substitute, because he doesn't know what's going on. Do what you would normally do in terms of chiming into the conversation and helping him out along the way if he has some questions. So, yeah, have respect for the substitute. That's a good one right there. That's a good one right there. All right, well, today's class topic, it says just go in order, pick up the clicker. Is this the clicker? I'm not familiar with one of these things. Hit the right arrow. Am I right or you're right? Right, hit the right arrow. Oh, it moves. It moves. And our class topic is the American Revolution. That's a pretty good topic. I'm excited for this. I feel like I'm going to have some life stories to add along the way. Okay, the American Revolution, or it says, AKA George Washington body slamming the British. Never mind. I'm not super fond of that picture, but there's no reason at all. Okay, let's get going. So you have your notes in front of you. They seem to be the same style that you've seen before. The big fat circle, that is where you're going to do a little bit of artwork today, okay? So when we get to the big fat circle, I will explain what needs to go in there, and it's going to be it's just gonna be a little pause along the way. Take some notes, draw a picture. Take some notes, draw a picture. And I hope that kind of breaks it up and makes it interesting for you guys a little bit, okay? Let's talk about the strengths of the colonies. We've come through the different chunks of the colonies. Now we've walked our way towards war. Well, I wonder what we're good at. Like, who's my athletes in the room? Athletes, you're going into a game. Are you aware of what your strengths are? I hope so. So let's find out what our strengths are. Strengths of the colonies. Well, they had a strong leader in George Washington. Good fella right there, George Washington. Strong leader in George Washington. Leadership matters. They're familiar with the land. Being from the Americas, they knew the creeks, the trails, the hills, the valleys. Whereas their opponent, the British, coming across the ocean, not born or raised in this area, they kind of have to figure out the creeks, the valleys, the hills, the swamps, all that kind of stuff. So kind of to make a comparison to your present day, I do know that your United States military has been engaged in conflict over the past couple of decades. And think about the American Army going to Iraq or Afghanistan. Were we familiar with the terrain over there? Not as familiar with those who grew up there. So this is a principle that still remains true to this day. Can't see? Like eyeballs or afro? Okay. Go ahead and get to a place where you can, and we can rethink your seat as much as we need to. Okay. Go ahead and get to a place where you can see for today. If you need to move up front or one of these rolling chairs, you can do that. Okay. All right, they're familiar with the land, and then they use guerrilla warfare tactics. Now, gorilla, not gorilla. Go ahead. I know there's stuff right there. Not gorilla like the animal, but guerrilla. What is a guerrilla warfare? Yeah, it's a style of fighting where you maybe hide behind a tree, use ambush style tactics, or a phrase that became popular is live to fight another day, right? You might break contact with the enemy. This was seen as very ungentlemanly. This was seen as maybe even cowardly. But to live to fight another day, I don't know, made sense to me, kind of why I'm here now. So that's what guerrilla warfare tactics are. I'm going to show you a video here in just a second to kind of illustrate that. And finally, strength of the colony is going to be an alliance with the French. We'll talk about that in a couple steps from now, but eventually we're going to land an alliance with the French, and that's going to be super important. Go ahead. Go ahead with that newfangled pencil sharpener. You know how they did it in my day? You whipped out your old buck knife and you just shaved the wood off until you had enough pencil to keep writing with. All right, now strengths of the colonies, that would mean there's going to be strengths for the opponent as well, the British force, the British Army. So strengths of the British, let's see what they are good at. One, very well-trained soldiers. Most powerful military on the face of the planet at this point in history. They've been fighting for decades on every continent in the world, and nobody has stopped them. So the strength of the training and the size of their army and just the quality of their soldiers, super significant, definitely a strength. They have the world's most powerful navy. Navy means ships on the water, and you got to think. The thing about a navy, you don't just build one overnight. You gotta literally take it back as far as planting the trees. You got to go decades backwards to plant the trees, to cut down the trees to build the boat. So the British Empire, being as strong and as old as it was, has the world's most powerful navy, the most boats, and the boats that have guns on them. Pretty significant. And then finally, lots of money compared to the colonies. Empire versus upstart. Goliath versus David, if you will, if that's an analogy that works for you. Had a lot of money. And the notes here from your instructor say, it says do this, money makes the world go round. Am I supposed to do this? We've been talking about money a lot. Yeah, the British have more money than the colonies. All right, now that's strengths. So the athletes, same ones that answered that first question. You know what you're good at. What else should you know about yourself? Your weaknesses. Yeah, if you know it about yourself, you can maybe at least try to address it. Right? That doesn't mean it's fatal, but you do need to be aware of your weaknesses. So let's look at some weaknesses of the colonies. First, kind of opposite. They had little money. If you don't have money, you can't pay soldiers. If you don't have money, you can't buy boats or ammunition or food. So little money, that's a bad thing to not have. Few people to serve in their military. There were just fewer people in the colonies than there were throughout the British Empire. So that's pretty significant. overall, that they didn't even have enough people to make a large army. Very small, very weak navy. Actually, just a non-navy. They basically didn't have any navy. They had some fishing boats, a couple little paddle boats that maybe they could take some people across the water with, but nothing like the British Navy, where they actually had boats with cannons on them. And your instructor says beat Navy. I don't know why you want to beat them, but it seems like he likes the Army and not the Navy. All right, so, and then on the other side, British weaknesses, right? Let's know what our opponent is weak at, and if we know that, maybe we can exploit it a little bit. They were not as familiar with the land, kind of the opposite of the colonists who are familiar with the land, and they were committed to this older style of fighting. It works for them, has worked for them for decades. They are the best open field fighters on the face of the planet. Nobody wants to go toe-to-toe with the British Army because they'll shoot at you, they'll shoot faster than you, and then they'll close across the open field and poke you with the bayonets. They'll cut you in half. Nobody wants to go toe-to-toe, muzzle-to-muzzle with the British in an open field, which is why the colonists had to adopt the guerrilla style of warfare. What we're going to do now is we're going to watch a video clip from a cinematic masterpiece known as The Patriot. And while the story is not exclusively accurate, a lot of what we see in this video clip is going to be. So the reason you all brought me your movie clip permission slip was so we can watch clips like this. I will say up front, there's some blood and guts, there's some shooting and bleeding and dying, but it's very descriptive for what I'm talking about. I can only say so much, right? I can show it to you better than I can say it to you. So my alarm on this newfangled timepiece has just gone off on my wrist. We'll pause for our bathroom break, and when we come back, we'll watch this video.
How do you know we had a bathroom break?
Well, it was in my notes. In my notes of yours. So Ryan, let me get you a preferred seat. Better.
You that's the video.
My bad. Oh yeah. Mine's called Battle Dove, like saved as Battle Dove. I call it classic. She's just having a sour day then.
That's it, before you sit down, phone up, you get out of the pocket.
We're just gonna swap her and Felix. She's gonna have to deal with. God, it's a big hair.
If you see around the key.
Well, I think he needs to be a front row guy. Don't you?
Oh, yeah. Who's here? Timothy. This is literally, where Michael's fishing. Because he's pretty down.
Swap their stuff. Alright, so check this out. I'm gonna call on our phone. Will you write it up?
I figured when we come back, we'll do that last chance.
And Friday.
Speaking on Reno.
All right, 4 of you moved. I told all of you, just go ahead and find your new sticky note. Thank you for that accommodation. You did not. All right, video clip. I already set it up. I want you to pay attention to this. You're right. I want you to pay attention to the style of fighting you're going to see and the equipment you're going to see. And I'm going to ask, when it's done, I'm going to ask you, what did you see about the style of fighting, both sides, and then the equipment, both sides, okay? Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Is it PG-13?
There's a difference in the styles of this part. He's not going to get it. Ignore that guy. We'll talk about him a little later. Ambush. Here's the biggest open field battle. Pay attention to the tactics here. Surprise! It's the whole army. All right, we'll leave it there with we've seen pretty much every style that the clip has to offer. So I heard some great things y'all were saying to each other and to me throughout that clip there. Travion, what is the big observation you had? He said the British are supposedly stronger, but how come in so many of those scenes they were losing? Great question. Why? Why in many of those battles were they losing?
I think it's because of how they fight.
Yeah, because of how the colonists were fighting. And what was that style of fighting? What was it like?
Dumb.
No. So I know what your point is. In the early scenes, as the British were getting ambushed several times in a row, what were the colonists doing? Firing from where? Behind the trees. Yeah, those early scenes. The colonists were, my favorite scene is he's behind the tree, he takes a breath, and then he pokes out, he shoots the British. They were using those ambush style tactics. That is the guerrilla warfare. They knew the trails, they knew the swamps, they knew the British would be passing through on their supply routes, and they ambushed their wagon trains over and over and over. So that is that guerrilla style warfare, that ambush surprise tactics. Now, a lot of the English gentlemen would think that's a cowardly way to fight. You're not going to stand man to man looking at your opponent from across the field. You're chicken. You're a coward. Colonists, on the other hand, are pretty proud of the way we trained them. Living to fight another day is better than dying a gentleman, I would say. And this guerrilla style warfare is going to lead to great successes by the colonists. So that's one style of fighting. What was the other style of fighting? This is where, Anthony, what did you say about this style of fighting?
It's dumb.
It's dumb, right? The open field, it's dumb style of fighting. Why would they do that? You passing notes in my class, young man?
No.
Get that later.
No, you can read it out loud. I don't know who it is. I just found it on. It says dear Katie, dear kid, Andy.
You guys love notes in my class?
But I'll read it.
We'll get it back.
Well, you saw his hand.
You want me to read it?
Yes, read it.
I don't know what it says.
That's exactly what someone who didn't have a love note fall out of pocket would say.
Read what the first word said.
Dear KG. That's cute. She got a nickname for you?
I don't know who that
She got a nickname for you?
King.
I'm not sure how to start this letter, but I feel we need to talk.
Bro, I swear to God, I found it on.
Those are 4 words, no bro, and we need to talk. Is this too private?
Bro, I don't know who that is.
I've been thinking about us a lot lately. Things.
Because who lived?
I got to dime out my class with this thing right here. Found a love note.
Can I read it, please?
And it starts with "we need to talk." Those are 4 words.
Not real favorable words.
He's doing exactly what I didn't get a love note person would do. Renee's all into this. All right. Things used to be so great. It was like we were MFEO. What does that mean?
Meant for each other.
I mean, everyone said it was perfect. I thought we would be together forever, but things changed. A relationship should be give and take, but recently you just seem to take.
I'm not.
I mean, you do whatever you want and you don't ask me about my own feelings. I don't think you ever took into consideration my feelings when you made decisions for us. Anthony, this is abuse.
Anthony, is this you?
This is emotionally abusive. Some of the things I would like to point out specifically that have upset me in the past few months include got a list. You always choosing which restaurants we go to eat at. You always making me feel like we have to hang out with your family. And you making me feel like I'm always inferior to you. I tried to make this work, giving you too many opportunities to change your ways. And yes, it's true that you have fixed some of our problems, but overall, you just seem to focus on changing the little stuff. It's a 2-pager. You haven't made any attempts to work on some big personality issues. I've been thinking about this for a while, and while I don't want to hurt you, I think it's time we ended this. All right, this is. Are you okay? I mean, it's just not going to work. I need some time by myself to see what it's like on my own. You are always making me do things you wanted to do and never let me have my own voice. I'm sorry things didn't work out, but I gave you time to change and you didn't. You are the one to blame for this. Sorry, but us is over. Kisses, AC. Who is that, Anthony?
KG.
Oh,
I said I know.
This sounds a whole lot like the best breakup letter
Well,
of
you did
all
it.
time. Mia goes, oh. He got it. All right, KG, King, George, AC, American. Now, I gotta say, Anthony, I placed this at Anthony's desk, and it worked out perfectly. I'm gonna get to the declaration in like 3 or 4 minutes from now, but so since that worked out so perfectly, remember what you're feeling right now. All right, all the giggles, all the ooh, all the we need to talk, burn. Remember what you're feeling right now, and in just a second, we will talk about the declaration a little more dirty. So I want to make it clear, this is not Anthony's love note. I was sliding on Anthony the whole time.
And I'm trying to figure out who
Somebody had the heart broke. Can I clap for you? That was the most perfect that's ever worked out. So don't go spoil that for anyone else.
You did that with other classes.
That was, I've done this in the past. This is true. That is the most perfect that's ever worked out. So Anthony, thank you. Renee, thank you. It's cool. And Mia at the end was like, oh my God, this guy.
Well, I don't know these
I'm like,
secrets. I was trying to figure it out and I was disappointed.
She was disappointed. Oh, that hurts. That hurts. All right, hey, like I said, I'm gonna hit the declaration in just a second, and but just thank you to Anthony for making that happen. And everybody, all right, let's talk about we were talking tactics and strategies, and you saw the equipment. Here's the things we didn't say. They had sabers. They used horses. They had bayonets. The close infighting, things got ugly. Things got ugly. Something Anthony was saying, picking on Anthony all sorts today. Anthony was like, how are those muskets so accurate? That's Hollywood magic right there, because those muskets were not accurate. In fact, the reason they were shoulder to shoulder, all bunched up together, is because the muskets weren't accurate at all. They were just trying to launch a whole wall of lead at the other side. Something else Travion and Anthony were kind of saying, and I bet several of you were thinking it, why are they just standing there? They taking turns? Like, you just got to stand there and hope it's not your turn? Yeah, that was the gentlemanly way to fight.
Russian roulette.
Russian roulette, a little bit, if you want to go with that. Yeah, sure. Technology is going to change things in the next war. But for now, with the smooth bore muskets that aren't very accurate, this is how you fight. This is how you fight. You usually shoot 3 to 4 rounds, and then you close with the bayonet. And it just gets ugly until someone leaves the field. So that is the style of fighting we're talking about. The British were very good at the open field fights. But the colonists, hiding behind the trees, ambush-style tactics, raiding their supply lines, living to fight another day, that's the guerrilla-style warfare that brought success to the colonists. So let's kick this war off with the first battle we're going to talk about is Lexington and Concord. It's on your notes. You got a couple things to write down, and I'm going to tell the story along the way. So Lexington and Concord are two small towns just outside of Boston. And in fact, to kind of bring it to today, or bring you some context, it'd almost be like saying Alma and Nichols, right? You never say the Battle of Lexington without also saying Concord. They're married. These two towns are married by the fact that these two battles happened on the same day, and it was the first battle of the Revolutionary War. So it'd almost be like saying the Battle of Nichols and Alma, two small towns right next to each other where battles happened on the same day. Remember where we left off on Friday, the First Continental Congress has said, hey, colonies, get ready for war. So that's exactly what they're doing in New England. People are preparing to defend themselves. They're smuggling in arms and ammunition, weapons and ammunition. They're hiding them away. So if the British soldiers come to their house, knock, 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 they can't find them right away, right? The colonists are getting ready for a fight, which is exactly what the Continental Congress said to do. Town militias are being trained. Those who have experience, like a gunsmith or a blacksmith, or maybe someone who had already fought in the army in a previous war, those people are training their neighbors. Didn't matter if you were a shopkeeper or a doctor or a pastor, you got brought in and you got trained on weapons and tactics. And each town was ready to defend itself. It'd be like if Alma had its own quick response force to protect our town in a time of need. That's what a militia is. Think of a militia as the first line of defense. If war comes, the first line of defense is going to be your town militia. There wasn't a big army yet. There wasn't a continental army organized with uniforms. It was just these town militias. They were volunteers, farmers, blacksmiths, smiths, store owners, but they had something at stake to protect. What did they want to protect? What did they have at stake in this whole thing? Come on, Travion. Their homes, their backyard, and ultimately their freedom, right? They wanted to fight. Whereas the British soldier who comes across the ocean, he's like, what do we got? What we got to fight these guys today? He didn't know why he was fighting. He was just getting paid to do it. The colonials, they wanted to fight because it's their home, it's their backyard. In Massachusetts, which this is where these first battles are going to be, in Massachusetts, about a third of all men between ages 16 and 50 were in a militia. 1/3 of all men military age were in a militia. And another word for these militias would be a Minuteman. Why is that a nickname for a militia? Come on, break that word in half. It makes sense.
Because they're not needed.
They'll be there in a minute. Say it again. They'll be there in a minute. Yeah, when called, and a lot of towns had a town crier or a town signal system. Hey, to the town square, to the town square. They'd be there in a minute. They're plowing their fields because they're a farmer. Drop the plow, pick up the rifle, go get ready to defend your home. they're the beginning of the National Guard, which Mr. Swanson is in the National Guard, right? If he gets called, he's got to go. So these militia, these Minutemen are the beginning of the National Guard. Well, the British now, they're not going to stand for any armed resistance. They can't have these colonials taking up arms and training and preparing to fight them. So April 19th, 1775, this is where a story begins. For months, these farmers and these townspeople have been stockpiling these weapons. The British general, Gage, he receives word that the Sons of Liberty have a stockpile of weapons in Concord. So he tells his army, hey, march to Concord, arrest the leaders, Samuel Adams and John Hancock, and seize all the weapons and ammunition. So that is what starts these battles, is that the British, at about midnight on basically midnight of April 19th, they wake up in Boston, they leave their barracks. 900 British start marching towards Concord. It's about 20 miles away. So anybody ever walked for 20 miles? You ever gone on a 20-mile walk? I've run a marathon before, so I know what 20 miles feels like. That's a long walk. And to do it with your rifle in a full uniform, wool, hot, all that kind of stuff, that's a long walk. That's why they started early in the morning. They wanted to surprise the colonists. They wanted to get there while everybody's still a little bit sleepy in the morning. Well, the colonists had an organized system for warning each other. They had some of their volunteers, some of their militia were going to be night riders. And anytime the British moved, they were going to get on their horses and they're going to ride across all the towns sharing the information. This is where we get the famous story of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. Have you heard of that? So there's the 5th grade version. There's the Liberty Kids version. Today I'm going to tell you the true story of Paul Revere. You've heard of Paul Revere, but what you probably only heard of Paul Revere. Paul Revere did not act by himself. This picture here kind of feeds the legend. One man riding through the night. What is he calling out along the way? The British are coming. The British are coming. That's probably not what he said. You know why?
That wasn't real.
Yeah, you know why? Who's British? Everybody saw themselves as British at this point. So to say that the British are coming wouldn't really make sense. We're all British. He most likely said, Anthony, do you know what he most likely said? The regulars are coming. Because the army was called the regulars, means they were in the army. The regulars are coming. The regulars are coming. So that's kind of myth number one. He didn't say the British are coming. Myth number two is that he traveled by himself. Just Paul Revere, this great hero, riding along and warning everyone along the way. In fact, this is a more accurate representation of the Night Riders. There were many of them. And more successful than Paul Revere was his partner, William Dawes. We don't hear that name in history very much, but we should. William Dawes was actually more successful than Paul Revere. Paul Revere, he got stopped at a checkpoint. He got stopped at a British checkpoint, much like police may set up a checkpoint along a 2-lane highway around here. And he got stopped and detained by the British. And not arrested, and he wasn't executed or anything like that, but he was detained. They took his horse from him. When they finally let him go in the morning, the message had already been spread. He was late to the game. He started walking towards Concord doing the best he could, but the message had already been spread. William Dawes, I'll give you that name there, William Dawes was more successful at spreading the message from Boston all the way to Concord. So why do we remember the name Paul Revere then? He's in the Sons of Liberty. He is a true character. This is true.
He got a book.
Ready for this? Ready for this? Ready for this? Nobody at Pizza Hut. How many take your order? Yes. She wants a Hawaiian pizza, so coming right up. Just kidding. Me to the guy in office. All right, I was starting to hear a couple things. Knox, what did you say about Paul Revere? What did you say about Paul Revere? Boston Tea Party. Yeah, well, he's involved in that, and actually, even more so, the Boston Massacre. He did that etching. He was an artist. He did that etching that kind of fed the propaganda from the Boston Massacre. Paul Revere is a true guy. He just doesn't deserve the credit he gets for this Midnight Ride. The reason we remember him is because in the 1850s, about 100 years later, a poem is written called The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. It becomes a very famous poem written by a very famous man, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, and it tells tells about this one heroic man, Paul Revere, riding across the countryside, warning about the British. One, if by land, two, if by sea. The British are coming, the British are coming. It's this poem that feeds our history. So if you're going to think like a historian, like we do in this room, we're always looking for the true history. And I have just told you the true history of the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. So William Dawes, don't forget that name. There's a lot of people in our history who get forgotten because they got left out of the history. All right, let's pick our story back up at about 5 a.m. 5 a.m. on the Lexington Green, the militia has been assembled. About 60 militiamen formed up on the Lexington Green, basically the town square. They're commanded by a farmer named John Parker. John Parker, he is a military veteran. He has experience fighting in the French and Indian War, and actually, of the 60 militiamen, about a fourth of them are related to him. Kind of like in Alma, you know how you look around and you got a lot of kinfolk, everybody's related to everybody. John Parker was related to about a quarter of his militiamen. This picture right here, I love this picture. I can place myself in this picture. I can almost hear the silence in the morning. I smell the gunpowder a little bit. I can feel the nervousness of the militiamen. So I love this picture. And also looking at this picture, now we don't have photography, but we do the best we can to interpret through these paintings here. About how far apart from each other are they? What would you say? 50, 60 yards at best. Yeah, 35 to 40 yards. What can you do from across about 40 yards?
Huh?
Can you hear each other from 40 yards away?
Yeah.
You stand on a football field or the soccer pitch and you shout to your teammate from about 40 yards away. Can you hear each other?
Yeah.
These guys were within shouting distance of each other. And in fact, the British commander, he says, "Hey, ye rebels, lay down ye arms, and there be no trouble today." He shouts at them, "Lay down your weapons. There won't be any trouble today." Well, what happens next is going to transform the world forever. So at sunrise, April 19, 1775, on one side you have 60 poorly armed militiamen. They don't have uniforms. They don't even all have guns. Some of them showed up with pitchforks or hoes, right? Farm tools. On the other side, you have hundreds of the most powerful army in the world. Remember, the British have been conquering all continents on the face of the planet for about 20 years now. But for these rebels, the fight is for nothing less than their very freedom. Their homes, their backyard, their freedom. So, Lexington militia gathered on the village common here. Dairy farmers, shopkeepers, freed African Americans, enslaved African Americans. It didn't matter who you were. This was our town, and many different people came out to answer the call. John Parker, remember him, he's just a farmer, but he stepped into leadership on this day. Here's a quote from him. He says, "Stand your ground. Don't fire unless fired upon, but if they mean to have a war, let it begin here." He's saying, remember we walked all the way towards 1776? We started in the 60s. And I said along the way, we're walking towards 1776. This is time for war. We've tried to reconcile. We've put out our grievances, but you know what, Anthony, you never changed. That's part of the Declaration, and they say that King George, you never changed. It's time for war. So that's what John Parker says. He says, if we mean to have war, let it begin here. Now, nobody knows who fired the first shot at Lexington. Could have been the British. Could have been the Colonials. Both sides say that it wasn't them. It could have been a farmer from off in the distance. Who knows? But once one shot rings out, when people are fighting with each other and tensions are high, let's say someone throws a punch, what happens next? It's on. One shot rings out, it's on. And this shot becomes known as, always for the first punch, this shot becomes known as the shot heard round the world. So you are at your first little circle. And what I want you to do, hopefully it's kind of breaking up the note-taking for you. I want you to sketch a little bit. You could do anything that illustrates the shot heard around the world. So maybe you draw a world with a gunshot on it, kind of like I have on the screen right here. Or I've seen students draw the world and they make a bullet kind of like flying around the world, shot heard around the world. So whatever you want to sketch, some of you are more artistic than others, that's fine. Whatever you want to sketch in that first little circle, I'm going to give you 3-4 minutes to do it, right? A little bit of a breakup of the lecture here. And sketch, color, and that's part of your notes. The shot heard around the world. So I'll give you a chance. I'll give you a second to get going on that. We're going to shop around the world. World with bullet holes, world with a big shot going around it. This first battle is called the shot heard around the world. Now, one more minute. I'm going to keep on telling the story. If you're sketching while I talk, that is fine. I know that helps me all concentrate. He's playing the drums over here. You'd be a good drummer in the revolution. Come here, Keith. Come look at this picture. Look at that. That's a soldier. That could be you in the battle. That could be you in the battle.
Hey, the first. So let's go here. Drop drum. Put drum on my stick. Cock it back.
All right, so once that first shot was fired, the British, being better trained, they would have fired about 4 times the rate of the colonists. They could have loaded and reloaded 4 times, gotten off 4 shots before the colonists even got off the second shot. That's exactly what they did. Knowing their tactics, they most likely fired 4 times. Then they charged with bayonets. Now, I say bayonet. Does everybody know what I mean? What is a bayonet? That is long knife at the end of the rifle, or even more accurately, a sword attached to the end of your rifle, makes your rifle, which is already about 4 feet long, makes your rifle into basically a long spear. So imagine the best trained army in the world running across the field at you. What would you do?
Run away.
Yeah, scatter. The militia, they scattered. And at the end, about eight patriots were dead and 10 were wounded. The first organized battle in the American Revolution, 8 patriots were dead, 10 were wounded, and the American Revolution had begun. Now, here's one more picture kind of showing the actual the chaos on the field on that day. And this next picture, a little bit more of a modern representation, more modern art, but this picture gives me chills every time I see it. Those guys, I'd stand next to those guys. I'd fight alongside those guys. These are the patriots that started our revolution and our walk towards independence. So I look at their face, their resolve, and I know it's just art, but I'd fight next to those guys. Okay, there's a drummer for you. You can be the drummer. That's great. All right. So let me finish the story here as you look at these good guys. So the Redcoats, Lexington was like a speed bump for them, right? They walked right through that militia. Some of them were injured, but not that many. The Redcoats keep on marching towards Concord. So it's like Nichols moving on towards Alma. They reached Concord about 9 a.m. Remember, they left their barracks at midnight. So they've been on the march for about 9 hours, tired, hungry, thirsty, all that kind of stuff. They're probably angry too, because they've already come through one little skirmish. Well, do you remember what they're looking for? What are they looking for in Concord? You got to help me out. You got to help me tell the story. What were they looking for in Concord? Weapons and leaders, right? They wanted to arrest the leaders and they wanted to raid their stores of weapons and ammunition. So that's what they do. They try to find all the hidden guns and ammunition, but they can't. The rebels had already gotten word of what was coming, and they hid all their weapons and ammunition. So that's important because they're going to need those in the coming days. As they search for weapons, as they're raiding the town, word spreads even farther. Patriots start coming in from all towns all around. And in total, about 1,000 militiamen, about 1,000 Minutemen have gathered by late morning, and they were intent on defending their homes from the British. The British, having not found what they were looking for, right? They marched 20 miles. Starting at midnight, they marched 20 miles. It's about 3 in the afternoon at this point. That's 15 hours later. I'm tired after 15 hours of work, right? Are you? If you were to be awake and active for 15 hours, it's probably about time to wind down. Well, what do they got to do? They'll walk all the way back to Boston. Empty-handed, they don't have their rebel leaders, and they don't have any weapons. Defeated, basically, they got to march all the way back to Boston. As they march all the way back to Boston, there's colonists in the wood line along the whole 20-mile stretch doing what?
Waiting for them.
Picking them off one at a time. These 1,000 colonists, they snipe at the British the whole way back to Boston. And in the end, about 1/3 of the British on that day were killed or wounded. 300 out of the 900 were killed or wounded. Day one, big victory for the Continentals. This first battle with the shot heard around the world that kicked off the war, kicked off the revolution, pretty big victory for the colonials. So that's how it starts, Lexington and Concord. Well, now that we've had a battle, we've got to organize ourselves a little bit more, and we've got to, oh my gosh, this never happens in the math hallway. I hate talking about myself, but all right, guys, I have to admit, I'm not just Mr. George. My last name is Washington. I am George Washington. So if you'll humor me, I hate it when they like make me into this big old hero. I'm really just trying to do the best I can for my country. But again, this is what Mr. Swanson wants to talk about. So let's choose a general. George Washington, that's me, takes command in June 1775. June of 1775 is when we organized into an army. Why was I picked? Well, they say that I had more experience than anyone else commanding troops. It's true that I had been in the French and Indian War and I had commanded a lot of troops in battle before. But there's another reason that they picked me as well, and it's because of where I'm from. I'm from Virginia. What group of colony was Virginia in? Southern colonies, that's right. So Virginia is considered the South. Most of that revolutionary spirit was coming out of what town and what area? Lexington, Concord, the blank massacre, the blank Tea Party. Boston, yeah. Boston is a New England colony. So they chose me as a Southerner to try to unite the colonies in leadership. We didn't want to see it as just a Boston fight. We didn't want to see it as just something that the New England colonies were doing. We wanted this to be all 13 colonies rebelling in revolution together. So that's another reason George Washington was picked, is because he's a Southerner. And his leadership held the troops together despite little rations, few supplies, and occasional mutinies. You know, not everybody loved me. Some soldiers thought I could do a whole lot better, and they tried to overthrow me. But that's some of the problems that I had to lead through. I do know one thing. I know that an army needs discipline. Discipline was essential in camp. I actually wrote in my journal one time, discipline is the soul of an army. It makes small numbers formidable. So we didn't have a lot of people. We didn't have a lot of people to recruit from. Well, by gosh, we were going to have discipline in our camp. So that's something that I was able to bring in my leadership. And another thing that I'm responsible for, that I'm known for, is creating a very elaborate spy network, right? I didn't lead just soldiers. I also had civilians who were listening at every corner. Tavern keepers, farmers, women. A lot of women were in my spy network because women often had access to conversations. Men were talking and they thought the women weren't listening. They were wrong. A lot of women brought us some very valuable intelligence as well. I want to point out my wife, Martha. I would be nothing without her. This is Martha Custis Washington. She was also a great contributor to the cause. She organized women in the camps. This is hard for you guys probably to understand today because this is not the way the military is today. But when my army was on the move, a lot of families came with the soldiers. They followed behind the army. A lot of hangers-on and vagabonds just followed along with the army. They're called camp followers. Well, Martha, she had a heart for them. She wanted to make sure that they felt cared for, that they were fed during the war as well. And also, she wanted them to be productive. We all needed them to be productive. She organized the women of the camp into sewing groups. And much like the Daughters of Liberty would mend clothing so that we didn't have to buy new cloth from the British, Mrs. Washington my wife, organized a lot of the women to mend the clothes and knit for the soldiers as well. Soldiers affectionately called her Lady Washington, which I just, wouldn't be anything without my wife. So I wanted to tell about her as well. And guess what? I don't deserve all the credit. I don't deserve much of the credit at all. Right? I don't want to talk about myself. I want to talk about someone else. We got a lot of help from other countries. Other people around the world saw our struggle for freedom and liberty, and they decided they wanted to help as well. One of these men, this is the Baron von Steuben. He comes from Prussia, and I know that rhymes with what you would say is Russia. That's not what Prussia is. Does anybody know where Prussia actually is modern day? I'm hearing a nope. Russia is the easy guess because it sounds similar. That's not it. It's actually modern day Germany. So Baron von Steuben is German blood, and he is he's notable for helping train my army. Remember, I knew that discipline was the key to having a good army. Baron von Steuben brought a lot of training and strategy and discipline to the army. And he was especially known for drilling and training soldiers at Valley Forge. So I believe on your notes, you need to write down what he was known for. It's a very hard winter, and I am going to talk about it a little bit more in just a second. But the Baron von Steuben, he really turned things around for us by helping us train through that hard winter at Valley Forge. The video clip y'all just watched, you saw the guy in a powder blue uniform, and he was drilling the soldiers. He's like, fire! That is, in the movie, he's not called Baron von Steuben, but that character is supposed to represent the training that came from Baron von Steuben. So if you ever watched The Patriot, that's who that character is supposed to represent. Another help we got was from a Frenchman named Marquis de Lafayette. This youngster, I tell you what, he became a really good friend of mine. He came over when he was 19 years old. He was from a rich family in France. He did not need to leave France. He did not need to leave his rich lifestyle. Why do you think he came over to America?
Oh, that's a good question.
That is a good question. Somebody take a guess. Because he loves something. What did he love?
Oh, girl.
No. Freedom. He loved freedom. He didn't need to leave his cushy lifestyle, but he wanted to contribute to the fight for freedom. So he comes over. Congress appoints him as a major general. That's a pretty high rank for a 19-year-old. They assigned him to me, and this young man became a friend, a trusted advisor, and a confidant. He was very helpful at many different battles throughout the war, and I would say he's most known for contributing his personal time and money to help the Americans win the war. He actually funded his regiment. When I gave him a regiment to command, he paid for the soldiers' salary. He bought them weapons. He paid for their food. He funded a whole regiment out of his own money because he loved liberty.
How can he have that much money?
Well, I don't understand that on my paycheck, but some people in the world just have enough money to give away. Yep, he was that wealthy. He's that wealthy.
How were they making money?
So he comes from France. His family was wealthy in France. They were of the aristocracy. They were the aristocrats. That's how. Great question. I catch you on the side if you got more questions about that. I'll say this real quick. He did return to France, and he actually fought in the French Revolution. So he fought for liberty in America. He fought for liberty in France as well. Here's a portrait of him. I believe Mr. Swanson has said this several times. We don't have photography yet in this period of time we're talking about, right? We haven't seen any photography yet. But where I come from, in my time period, this time period, we got something pretty cool. It's not exactly like a camera. Is that the word? What do you take pictures with? Camera. That's the word. That's the word. It's not exactly like a camera, but I think it's even cooler. A lot of people, a lot of famous people in my day had their faces plastered in what was known as a life mask. They would plaster their whole face, peel the plaster off, and then they'd use that mold to make a marble representation of that person's face.
You got one?
And that I don't have my own. Well, I just take it back. Yeah, George Washington does have a face mold, and I'll show you that. But right now, I'm going to show you Marquis de Lafayette. This is Marquis de Lafayette's life mask. Looking at his life mask and looking at the portrait, how do you think the artist did?
Not good at all.
I think he's fairly close. But
Where's his hair?
I think that's awesome that this man, Marquis de Lafayette, is frozen in time because of this plaster life mask. Pretty cool. little bit of side fact, a little bit extra for you. Anytime there's a town named Lafayette or Fayetteville, there's a Fayetteville, Georgia, there's a Fayetteville, Arkansas, there's Fayetteville, North Carolina. Those are all named in honor of Marquis de Lafayette. So he was very influential at the time that towns started to spring up. They were like, hey, let's name ourselves after Marquis de Lafayette. So any town, Fayetteville or Lafayette, is inspired after him. All right, moving right along. Let's talk strategies. All right, now that we have a war on, let's talk strategies. The Americans were going to fight a war of attrition. I know that's kind of a big vocab word that we need to break down and understand. Does anybody know, can you put it in your own words, what is attrition? You have fought a war of attrition before, you might just not know it. Can you put it in your own words? Mia? Allison?
Say it again in another.
Attrition. I'll tell you what it is. It's when you wear someone down. You, I bet, have waged a war of attrition against your parents before. Mom, can I go to the concert on Friday night? No. Can I go to the concert on Friday night? Can I go to the concert on Friday night? Can I go to the concert on Friday night? You ever badgered your parents into something until they go, yes, just go. You ever done that? That's called attrition. You wore them down. Now, in a military sense, Jason, what you got?
Oh, there you go.
Big stretch. In a military sense, that means you're just going to hang on longer than the other side. The Americans may have been weaker militarily. They may have had fewer people, but they could just wait it out. If we keep fighting until they are tired of fighting, they'll just go home. This is our home, not theirs. If we just hang on long enough for them to go away, that's attrition. The British had a very long supply line. They had to bring their stuff all the way across the ocean. The Americans, meanwhile, had everything that they needed at home. So attrition was just wait them out longer than they're willing to fight. Wear them down and wait them out. Next strategy was the guerrilla tactics, and we talked about that on in. Insurgency means using the civilian population, not just the fighters, but also the civilians. If a family is loyal to the patriot cause, they might provide you food. They might provide you housing. They might give you livestock for your army, whatever. So that's what an insurgency is using the civilian population as well. And finally, make an alliance with one of Britain's enemies. We would love to make an alliance with France, because if they come on our side and we get their support, maybe money, maybe their navy, if we can make an alliance with France, we got a chance. So this is the American strategy. On the other hand, the British strategy is to break the colonies in half, splitting north and south. If we could cut them in half, right at the Virginia area or maybe the Carolinas, separate the northern economy from the southern economy, they can't talk to each other, they can't give each other goods and services. That's how the British thought that they would have a chance. And blockade big port cities. Because water is what? What do I always say? Water is life, water is money. If you block the port cities, they can't trade with each other either. So cut them in half, blockade the ports, and then use loyalists to divide and conquer. Loyalist is the term for someone who has remained loyal to King George. An American colonist who's loyal to King George. Remember, not everybody was in favor of this revolution thing. Some of them remained loyal, and they become called loyalists. All right, now that we have a strategy, we have a general, we have a strategy, let's fight a couple more battles. The next big battle is going to be in June of 1775, so April to May to June. This is 2 months later. Lexington and Concord is in April. Now we're going to fight a battle called Bunker Hill, June 17, 1775. Bunker Hill is just outside the city of Boston. The British would love to seize Boston, right? This is where all that revolutionary rabble is coming from. Let's seize Boston. Well, the colonists say, not today, Satan. Tell the devil, no, not today. The British send line after line after line at these colonists who are defending this place known as Bunker Hill. The colonists shoot line after line after line, and they kill a lot of British. They kill and wound a lot of British before they have to leave the hill. Now, from a military perspective, they did lose the battle, because you always want to maintain the ground that you're on. They had to run away. Okay, they had to leave the hill, but it was an emotional victory because of how many British that they had killed. There is a nice little story that comes out of the Battle of Bunker Hill, and this is what you're going to sketch here in just a second. The leader of the colonists at Bunker Hill was named Colonel Prescott, And Colonel Prescott knew that his troops were in a hard place. They didn't have a lot of ammunition. Where are my hunters in the room? You know, deer, turkey, pheasant, whatever. I got one, I got two. Felix is wearing hunting camouflage. All right, Felix, let me ask you. You're going out on a hunt, you got 3 bullets. Deer hunting, you got 3 bullets. You gonna take that 300-yard shot?
No.
You can take that 300-yard shot.
Mine's set for 300.
All right. Mr. Taylor, you gonna take that 300-yard shot? Probably not. You gonna take that 200-yard shot? You guys are killing me. Anthony, are you good at marksmanship? All right, check it out. You guys are killing my analogy.
Put it into another perspective. Who bird hunts? Okay. Turkey hunt, 75-yard shot. You got 2 shells.
That ain't make it.
50 yards?
You can do it at 75. It'll shoot 75. But
I'm not
without all that luck, you know, you never.
I got to work on my hunting analogies. Here's my point. Colonel Prescott said, gentlemen, do not fire until you see the whites of their eyes. Now, Jason, open your eyes real big for me. From here to Jason, I can see the white part of his eye. Barely. I can see the white, barely. So what are we, about 12 yards? The statement was, don't shoot until they're right on you. Don't waste your ammunition. If you're not going to kill a man, don't pull the trigger. Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes. So that's a pretty powerful statement. And that means that a lot of British got killed real close. And it got bloody real fast. This is the Battle of Bunker Hill. Now, there's this young soldier named Charles Bug-Eyed Bingham, and whew, he had a bad day at Bunker Hill, as you can see. His eyes were a little bit larger than most. Come on, y'all, that's funny. Laugh. Force a laugh. All right, here's what I want you to write down. Or not write down, but do your sketch here. I want you to make something that looks like a big eyeball, right? Do not fire until you see the whites of their eyes. So bloodshot, blue-eyed, green-eyed, brown-eyed girl, I don't care. Draw something that looks like a big eyeball and write the phrase, don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes, which means don't waste ammunition. All right, so I learned I got to use turkey hunting. 2 shells, 75 yards.
Well, when he said that, I said, no,
You can shoot 65 yards, he's not gonna kill him. That's it.
but turkey, quail, work.
Got another minute on whites of their eyes? You can keep sketching after I move on. That is fine. But in the interest of time, I will move on in just a second. Weird. All right, so if you are still sketching the eyeball, that is fine. I know that probably helps some of you focus to draw as you listen, but I am going to be moving on in the interest of our story and of time. So now we're going to talk about the difference between the writers and the fighters. We've talked so far about the men who are actually waging war with their guns. There's an old saying out there, though, about the difference between the pen and a sword. Anybody know what that saying is? Maybe ELA class, maybe a little Shakespearean. Mia doesn't know. Okay. Guess what? I get to teach you something today. The old saying is that the pen is mightier than the sword. What do you think that means?
Get more copies out.
The pen is mightier than the sword. Felix said something about copies. It's not really copies. You can write stuff with a pen that you cannot write with a sword. This is true. How many times across time and history has a written statement been more dangerous than a rifle or a sword? Writing is powerful. That's what that statement is saying, is that writing is powerful, and not everybody in our revolution here has to be a fighter. There's some very significant writers that we're going to talk about right here as well. The first one is going to be Thomas Paine. We called him T-Pain. Anybody? We called him T-Pain. So I want you to think of this as the original T-Pain. T-Pain over here, he writes a document called Common Sense. I wonder what it was about.
Oh, I remember.
Oh, yeah, do you? Good, good. Common Sense was a pamphlet that spoke to the American need to separate from England. Now, when I say pamphlet, this much is not on your notes. When I say pamphlet, I know that that's something you guys probably aren't very used to. You guys are used to books, you guys are used to magazines. You definitely get a lot of information from that electronic box that y'all keep putting in your pocket, right? Pamphlet was how messages got communicated in my time. And Thomas Paine's pamphlet is 47 pages long. And really not even full-size pages. This is not Common Sense. I wish I had a copy. But this is about what a pamphlet would be like. Small, concealable, right? If somebody was going to try to take it from me, I could just slide it in my pocket real quick. Also, if we wanted to pass it from person to person, I could kind of do that stealthily, especially if it was an illegal pamphlet to have. This is what a pamphlet would have looked like. And I know some of y'all pick up pamphlets at the doctor's office or at church or something like that. This is a pamphlet. Well, Thomas Paine's pamphlet was 47 pages long. It was published in January of 1776, and its main theme was that it advocated independence from Great Britain. And it was written to the people of the 13 colonies. Thomas Paine was an immigrant. He came to America. He said, this is a beautiful country that could be and should be. So he used his talents as a writer to write this pamphlet and try to advocate for what he believed the Americans needed to do. Here's a couple of key ideas. I'll go just briefly. He writes about American exceptionalism. He says, this land is better than any other around. You guys are special. We are special. We need to do something. We need to do something to protect our liberty. So American exceptionalism. 2, this pulls on Enlightenment thought just a little bit. He said that government's purpose is to serve the people. His quote is that government is a necessary evil. A key, how is it necessary and evil? Now, pick your head up for me. It's necessary to keep order, but he also sees it as evil because it may restrict your rights, your liberties, it may imprison people wrongfully, all that kind of stuff. So government is a necessary evil. He says America should create a nation based off of self-rule. He was trying to speak out against kings, queens, and the monarchy. In Europe, that's how they were ruling. One family passes the leadership based on their birth order and all that kind of stuff. He said, that's not what leadership should be. You guys should select your leader. You should vote for the person who says that they're going to lead you the best and proves it. Self-rule. We've seen that in the colonies. And then finally, this is a big idea, a strong central government. There should be a strong central government that protects the rights of the individual. And on Wednesday, we are going to talk about our new government. We're going to see a balance there. Strong central government, but protecting the right, but not trampling the rights of the individual. It's going to be a hard balance to find. So this is Thomas Paine, very formative writer. He goes a little bit off the deep end later in his life. He was super important to the revolution. But later in his life, he goes over to France. He becomes a part of the French Revolution. As that, he got arrested in France. And I don't know what led him to believe this, but he blamed me, George Washington. He blamed me for getting him arrested in France. And when he was finally let out of jail, he writes again. He picks up his pen and he writes again. And he writes a letter blaming me for getting him arrested in France. And I don't know why he thought that. I didn't have anything to do with him getting arrested in France. And a lot of people in America, when they read that, they started to think less of him because he attacked me. And a lot of people really liked me at that point in history. So Thomas Paine kind of has a mixed review. He's very influential, but then he kind of went off the deep end. And I really like this statue. I think it's very powerful. Like he's giving his writing, which is more powerful than a gun. Sometimes the pen is mightier than the sword. Another piece of writing we need to talk about is the Declaration of Independence. So Anthony has already given us our concrete experience of what the Declaration of Independence was like. So Anthony, thank you for playing along with that. A little bit more about it here. So it was drafted by what's known as the Committee of Five. This is also not on your notes. Committee of Five, I bet you recognize three of those names. What are the names you recognize? Benjamin Franklin,
Adam, Thomas.
John Adams, Thomas Jefferson. Those three got famous. Those three are in our textbooks. Two other guys, I don't know why they're less famous, but they are Robert Livingston, Roger Sherman. They make up the Committee of Five. They all threw out ideas. They brainstormed. It was basically like a small group project. You guys have done small group projects before. This was a small group project for them. However, in your small group project, isn't there usually one person that does a little bit more work than the rest? That was Thomas Jefferson in this case. Thomas Jefferson is the primary author of the Declaration of Independence. Three main parts to the Declaration. And Anthony, this is where you helped us out a lot. Think about the love letter that I read. First part, known as the preamble, lists the reasons for breaking away from British rule. Reasons for breaking up with Anthony. Second part lists 27 grievances or complaints against King George. Our letter listed grievances, not 27, but it listed grievances against Anthony. You never let me choose a restaurant, you never let me visit my family, whatever those couple were, right? And then the third part listed attempts to settle the differences that had been unsuccessful. Hey, King George, we've already tried to make nice with you and you keep ignoring us. Hey, Anthony, we had a good run, but you keep just trampling on me and making me feel inferior. So our silly little letter here, which was a breakup letter, is supposed to be descriptive of the best breakup letter of all time. Best breakup letter of all time. It's almost as if they said the age-old line, it's not me, it's you, and it's time to break up. Conclusion, the only way to protect American rights is to declare independence. And that's what this is, a Declaration of Independence. To declare independence. All right, now let's pick up your notes again. Declaration of Independence, I'll connect that to Thomas Paine. It was inspired by Thomas Paine's Common Sense. Thomas Paine's Common Sense sold over 100,000 copies. That was a lot. Actually, at the end of the Revolution, there's over 500,000 in circulation. So that's a lot of copies for the time period. July 2nd, 1776, Congress adopts this resolution. A lot of people thought July 2nd would be the day that we celebrate for the rest of our country's history. But we don't have a holiday on July 2nd, do we? It's not called the 2nd of July. On the 4th of July, this is when the signing actually happened. Not all the authors, or not all the signers signed on this day, but July 4th is when Jefferson presents the document, and a couple of key players signed the document on July 4th, 1776. It's the date that is written at the top of the document, so it's the date that gets remembered in history. While we have the 4th of July, Independence Day, July 4th, 1776. Hey, we've arrived. We've been walking towards 1776. Here we are. It's time to keep fighting our battles, right? It's time to actually wage war. We have declared independence. These ideas, they were not new. Thomas Paine wrote them in his pamphlet. A lot of colonists have been talking about these ideas for a long time. But the fact that it was written down and sent to King George, right? They sent a copy of it overseas to let him know what they were declaring. That's what was radical. That's what was new, formally declaring independence from King George. A couple of famous pictures here. So left side, Benjamin Franklin, middle, John Adams, and then standing up is Thomas Jefferson. And like I said, it's Thomas Jefferson who's considered the primary author of the Declaration of Independence. And then, hey, what's this guy doing? Oh my God, they're shooting at the Declaration of Independence. That is a national treasure right there. We need to protect it. Y'all a bunch of Baptists today, so quiet. Responses to the Declaration. One, many Americans were divided. Not everybody agreed on this whole independence thing. We already talked about some are loyalists. Some say loyal to King George. However, big crowds in the major cities, Philadelphia, Boston, they gathered to fire guns, cheer, ring bells, and celebrate this Declaration of Independence. Others disapproved, or they did not want to break with the king anyway, so we have divides. Here's a very important response. No longer is the word colonies being used. We are now United States. The word is used right at the top of the document. We are states, or each each colony is now a state. So no longer are we colonies of England, we are independent states. And then many states started to draft their own constitutions. However, we're going to find that to be a struggle at the national level, something we'll talk about on Wednesday. All right, this is going to be our last talk of this chunk, of this section, all right? While I'm here, while I'm your substitute, I'm going to tell you the story of crossing the Delaware River. And you may recognize this picture. Oh, I hate the way they made me look so regal and royal. That's not how it happened. Okay, this painting may be famous. It may be like the best known image of the Revolutionary War, but this is not what it looked like crossing that river on that night. I'm going to tell you the real story. In fact, the real story is even more heroic than this picture could have possibly portrayed. So you do already see it. When Washington crosses the Delaware, it is a surprise attack on Christmas night, 1776. And I'll let you start sketching if you wish. I want you to draw a Christmas tree, because that's going to represent that it was a surprise attack on Christmas night, 1776. So the end of 1776, right? December, it's almost January, it's almost the new year. We had a series of defeats. I got pushed out of New York. I got pushed out of New Jersey. My army was on the run. In fact, a lot of my soldiers, their enlistments were coming up. And when their contract was over, they were free to go home. I had no way to hold them except for inspiring them to want to keep fighting. A lot of these soldiers had an enlistment set to expire on December 31st. So I knew I had to make a move before December 31st because that's when their enlistments were going to be up. At the same time, let's talk about the mix between fighters and writers. Thomas Paine publishes his second major pamphlet on December 19th, 1776, and I had a portion of it read to my troops before we crossed the river. Morale was bad. Everybody was grumpy. A lot of guys didn't even have shoes. Can you imagine December outside without shoes? Well, this is what was read to my troops, and every time I read it, I get goosebumps. So I'm just going to read it to you guys, and maybe you can imagine how this would have inspired my troops. These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of his country. But he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered. Yet we have this consolation with us, that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. And this really inspired my soldiers. They realize things are hard right now, but because of the hard, we're going to have a glorious victory on the other side. Now, this is the famous picture, okay? You look at this boat. It's round bottom. It's a rowboat. There's ice chunks all throughout the river. It's a very clear night. All those details, not true. Here's a more accurate representation of what it might have looked like on that night. Flat bottom boats. That's how we crossed the river. We actually poled our way across the river. Many soldiers packed onto each flat bottom boat, to include cannons and horses. In total, 2,400 men crossed the river on that night. 18 cannons and 75 horses as well. We had a password for ourselves that night. Our password that night was victory or death. And if we encountered anyone throughout that night and we thought maybe it was an intruder, we would shout out victory, and they would shout out or death. Challenge and password. And that's what we believed. We had to do something to get some momentum back on our side. It was victory or death. Now, crossing the river, on the other side, we march towards Trenton, and we fight the Battle of Trenton. At Trenton, we actually didn't encounter any British. The enemy that was there was called Hessians, and the Hessians were mercenaries from what would be modern-day Germany. They didn't care about the American colonies. They didn't care about the land. They didn't care about the tobacco. They were just paid to be soldiers. They were good soldiers. They were a formidable enemy. So catching the Hessians by surprise and winning the battle, that was pretty significant. In the end, after the battle, there were 22 killed, 83 wounded, and 900 captured, along with a pretty substantial amount of weapons and supplies, which is pretty significant for my army because we were running out of weapons and supplies. So the Battle of Trenton, very significant, a major inspirational victory for the Continental Army. back to that painting a little bit here. That painting, we'll give you some details on that painting. It is 12 feet long, 12 feet tall by 21 feet long. So it's darn near a life-size picture of a boat. 12 feet tall, 21 feet long. That's probably almost the whole back, back wall of this room here. And it is presently on display at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. So if you want to go see that famous painting of Washington's Crossing, it is in New York City right now. Right, field trip? Field trip, anybody? Last little fact before we round it out. On this crossing, there were many famous future Americans, to include future presidents James Madison, he'll be the 4th president. Future President James Monroe, he'll be the 5th president. This is James Monroe right there. Future Supreme Court Justice John Marshall. Secretary of the Treasury Alexander Hamilton. Has anybody ever seen the musical? And Vice President Aaron Burr also has a leading role in the musical Hamilton. So a very significant battle that takes place at Christmas of 1776. This is where we will pause for today and hold on to these notes because we're going to be continuing tomorrow. I don't know when Mr. Swanson's going to come back, but you will continue your notes tomorrow. And I do notice that if you look at the very front of your notes, the picture that is on the top right, that's Washington crossing the Delaware River right there. So as we wind down, you can bring your pencils back up. If they were mine, of course, you can keep your own. And if you have any questions about grades or papers or zeros or no names or whatever, if you need to turn something in, I'll take that now. We got about 5 minutes till I can let you go, so we'll just use this as wind down and tidy up.